Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, listeners. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our show tonight. I am the sorceresscagliastro, blood sorceress, necromancer in the hands of nine, and I am honored to be on the air tonight with my illustrious co-host, Rogue Ostrowski. Good evening, Chris.
Hello, Sorceress. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. With our producer and science officer, morganstknight. How are you, Morgan?
Good evening, Sorceress. I'm wonderful. How are you tonight?
Good, thank you. And we have with us tonight Victor the Voice Furhman. Victor, it's always good to have whatever time we can get from you. Victor will be spending the first 45 minutes of the show with us tonight. Thank you, Victor. How are you tonight?
Wonderful, Sorceress, and thank you. It's always a pleasure when I have the time to join you.
So tonight we're talking about divination, and at some point it was my intention to read someone tonight on the air, which might still happen. I'm waiting for a text, but we'll see what happens. And if not, we have a lot to talk about anyway. Divination. And I say it like that because I have to shake my head. I am not a roadside psychic. Nothing against roadside psychics, or maybe I do have something against roadside psychics. I'm not sure. But the point is that divination is not, it is absolutely not, flipping a few cards and telling you the story about the rest of your life. Divination is a diagnostic tool. Those of us who do it at the level of understanding the severity at which the information hits the client, take it very seriously. Those of us for whom this is a significant portion of our practice, we understand the value, the importance, we understand the relevance of life. We understand what this could mean to someone when you tell them information that they did not have previously. We understand that we are moving things around by providing this information. When you sit with a client, or you sit with someone who wants to know something about their future, you have to understand that anything you tell them changes their path. There's so much to talk about tonight that my introduction is sort of scattered because I want to make sure that I mention much of what it is that I want to cover here tonight on the radio. I wrote a book called Divination, and I wrote it because it occurred to me that there was a missing element in the market of materials which discuss divination in the way that I see it. And the way that it works for me is that it's very important to understand that as a practitioner, one has to have techniques that are respectful. One has to work within the bounds of integrity, and one has to make sure that the client understands that you're not their new best friend that they're going to call every 15 minutes. I remain as detached as possible from the work of reading people. I think it is important to know as little as possible. When I wrote this book, I talked about many methods, some of which were common, some of which were not. I am not a tarot reader. There are very few great tarot readers. The ones that are great are truly great. The work itself is very distracting. The art of working with tarot cards is the art of understanding the minutiae of the artwork, taking that into consideration, and then yet casting that aside and having the strength to see one's own interpretation through those materials. I personally use something I call the nothing, which is sitting with someone and just allowing the information to arrive. It has been my way of doing this for many, many years, decades of work. And in the last, I would say, 20 to 25 years, it's been my exclusive way of working is with the nothing. Divination not only tells us what's going on with the person in front of us, but those of us who are sorcerers, who act at the level of utilizing sorcery in their work, know that divination is useful when it comes to necromancy and even working with demons. So I open the floor, as we do in the beginning of the show, and talk about what divination is to all of us, and and I'm sure we all have a great story. And tonight I think that I want to start with Victor because he is not going to be on the air with us the whole time, if that's okay with the rest of the crew. And I want to ask Victor, I don't know if you actually practice divination, but I know you've seen a great deal of it in action. What are your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I don't hang out a shingle, and I don't have a practice of divination, but I do have a practice of spiritual counseling. And in the process of not hanging out a shingle, what happens is I have a lot of people who are referred to me or come to me, usually people who are having a lot of issues with traditional methods. And my background comes from training as a spiritual counselor through interfaith ministry in the seminary that I had done in the 90s. And I have a practice similar to what you're talking about, this nothingness, because people come to me and they'll tell me what's going on, what's bothering them, and then I will allow that blank to form, that nothingness to form, and see what types of information come through. So I guess in a way that's very similar to, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, but it sounds like what you're doing and what you're, the work that, the way you go about working. It's almost like having a canvas, stretching a canvas onto a frame or onto an easel, and then starting to let the palette put the colors down and seeing which way the colors form and the shapes form, and then the information that comes through from those shapes, forms, and so on. I actually had a situation just yesterday where a woman referred to me, and over the phone I talked to her and then I got a sense of the issues that she was experiencing, and then a number of things came through, and I started asking her, explaining what I was seeing, does this make sense? And then she started crying. And it basically, in a matter of about 3 or 4 minutes, from the nothingness, we had basically hit the bullseye. And from that point forward, we were able to work and process through the things that she needs to do, the steps she needs to take. And one of my parts of my practice, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, is if someone comes to me for information, I will not give them information unless they agree in contract, in verbal contract and energetic contract, that the information that I give them will result in work that they have to do. And if they're not willing to do the work, I'm not willing to give them the information. And I'm very, very firm about that, because there's so many people who just come and drain you for everything you can give them and then do nothing. And in my mind, if I'm going to give them the information and the energy, they have to work with it.
That's a very interesting point, Victor, and a lot of what I wrote in Divination and the way that I teach it is just that point, is that as giving as I am in the work, and I am, although that might not always be the reputation one hears about, someone comes to me in need and they get taken care of, I'm very careful when it comes to divination, because everybody wants you to sit down and tell them their future, which is not really what divination in the pure sense is. It's interesting and amazing to hear that you asked for that contract, Victor. I assume most of the time that happens and they follow through and they do the best that they can to do that. And that the fulfillment in that for you is to make the contract. Of course, you can't guarantee that they'll do it. But I understand what you're saying, because you really are giving quite a bit of yourself in that moment. And for that, you would like some kind of agreement, at least a sensation of agreement that the person in that moment is acting in the true valor of what it is that you've asked them to do. For me, a lot of times people come to me and say, okay, now that you know that, can you fix it for me? So that's something else that we're going to talk about as we get into this show. But I do not ask my clients to do anything with what I'm giving them, and here's why. I say to them that the information that I'm providing is the information that is existing around you right now and is available to be read by those of us who have the skills to do it. So in that sense, we are in that agreement together. However, it is not my job to decide for you or to assist you or even to urge you to do anything about it. Because my client base is large and because I have chosen to work in this way, I say to them, it is entirely up to you what you do with it. But, and here's the interesting thing, and this is what I think connects to what you're saying, Victor. You cannot unring the bell. This is what I tell them before the reading. What I tell you, you cannot unhear. So be prepared to know this now. And now that you do, it's your responsibility to live a life having this information. So I think it's kind of similar. I think we work in a similar way all the way around.
just as a follow-up to what I was saying, so this person in particular, I'd given her a series of exercises to do in terms of questions that I asked her to write down in an answer. And today she sent me a very lovely message that in the process of following through with this exercise that I gave her, a number of understandings came to her, and it actually has helped her to start going back onto the path that she needs to be on. So I was very gratified that she did follow through with the exercise that I gave her to perform, and that it's very effective for her, and that was a very gratifying thing to do.
Well, you are a true healer. You are a man of compassion. And knowing you in that way, it makes sense to me that you would ask for that sort of completion, but also be there to give some material, some suggestions, some direction and focus to that individual so that they have something to use moving forward.
Absolutely.
Chris, tell us about you and divination. Where does this place in your work and in your life?
Well, when I do divination, which isn't a lot, I mean, I'll be honest, it's not exactly my strong suit. But I tend to use either bones or I use runes, which is what I learned on. I can't. You can show me tarot cards all day long, and I'll just look at you and go, "Oh, that's pretty," because that means absolutely nothing to me. As far as the runes go, what I tell people is you have to understand when you look at these don't necessarily read your future. They read what's going on as far as the possibilities in your life. The Norse and the Germanic talk about having the weird, which is where the thread of your life is going. Now, that's not a straight line, from point A to point B. It could be that at some point in your life, I could tell you that, okay, you're going to own a business, and it's going to be a wonderful business. But there's so many variables in between that you could be going the way you're going now, and you'll find it tomorrow. If you take one wrong turn, you're going to end up finding it 10 years from now. This is the objective that you're going towards. You've got to figure out how you're going to get there.
So you're giving them the map and or where the map might go.
Right. I'll be the map. I'm not going to be your GPS and tell you where to turn. This is your journey.
Chris, you said that this is not your strong suit, but maybe it's the connection that you and I have. You have a very powerful connection to me, and you will say to me, I see that this is what you're doing now, and this is what I feel is going to happen from it, mostly when I deal with demons in this kind of work. Do you not consider that to be divinatory skill?
Yeah, but I don't look at it. I guess I kind of separate that a little bit. You're my friend. You're not somebody that I'm not doing it as a business. I have a strict guideline as far as I have what's personal and I have what's business.
Of course.
There's certain things that I will say to you or one of my friends that I will not say to somebody that I'm doing business with. Because I'm not going to get that attachment, with a stranger or somebody that's just coming in off the street. I don't want to get that personal because the next thing you know, I'm no longer a reader, I'm a crutch, and I refuse to do that.
Right, but let me just jump in and say to you that whether you're using it as a business or whether you're not, you have a tremendous power of divination in using the nothing, because I've seen you do it. I've been the recipient of that. And yes, we have a relationship that is not a stranger walking in off the street, absolutely. But you will send me a text at 2 a.m. and say, I have a feeling that whatever you're doing right now, you need to step back from, or you need to whatever. And we've had a million of these conversations, you and I. So I think that there is much more divination in your work then maybe you recognize as that. And I say that because the word divination is so important tonight. And we use divination when we're doing sorcery. We stop and we take a look at where this could go. So I think that if we're looking at what divination is all the way around, I think that you're doing quite a bit of it. Because you work in the now, which is something we'll talk about, but you're showing people what the possibilities are, the tangents that could come from where they're standing right now with what they're doing. So I think there's a lot more, you're doing a lot more of it than you even realize. Did I put you on the spot? Sorry.
No, that's fine. I mean, I don't see it that way. And it could just be because of where I'm sitting. I don't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
You've said before, I could be standing next to the battleship and I just don't see it.
Mm-hmm. That's invisibility.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But
right,
like
sure.
I said, like the same thing with what I do for you. I tell you, okay, this is what I see or this is what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you what to do. I mean, you're over 21. You can do whatever you please.
I
and
happen
it's not
to be.
my place.
I happen to, in fact, be over 21. Quite a bit over 21.
We're both over 21 by more than what I care to think about.
Got a couple of 21-year-olds in us.
Yeah, at least
you
3.
do the math.
Yeah, and I just won't do that for people because once you put, like Victor said, you put an idea in somebody's head, they're going to go towards that.
Right. Well,
And
that's the responsibility.
Right, and there goes free will also. Now, I'm not going to get all fluffy and all that shit about free will and all that nonsense. But still, if I'm telling you and you're looking at me for advice, so the person is going to be at a kind of receptive position that what I say you're going to listen to, and whether you know it or not, you're going to listen to it a little bit more than what you think. It's going to be almost like a subliminal message that when I tell you something, I refuse to tell somebody this is what I think you should do. This is the goal you want. You have to figure out how you want to do it. If you have a plan already, I'll tell you if the plan's going to be workable or if it's not. Because like I said, there's so many variations. I mean, you could walk out the door and get hit by a car. I mean, I'm not going to see that coming. If we were that good, I'd be a millionaire because I'd play the lottery every week.
Mm-hmm. I see that coming sometimes. I see physical danger coming. And you are that good. You are that good. And I'm telling you're that good because of a particular text you sent to me about 6 weeks ago, as I recall. And I will send it to you if I still have it on this phone, in which you said to me, I don't know what you're doing right now, but I think you should take a break. Or something like that, I'm paraphrasing. And you had a sense that it was going to go rough. And so I think that you underestimate yourself and your divination skills. And I tell you that because I think you are amazing at what you do. And people should consider maybe coming to you for some divination. I think it's very important that I say that.
Well, I thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm going to jump over to Morgan, because Morgan looks at this from, I think, a different point of view in some ways. Morgan, where's divination in your life?
Well, for me, divination is about reading the current energy. It's not about telling the future. It's not about trying to figure out what went on in your past either. I don't care about that. I need to know where the energy is now with people, where it could potentially go, what all the potential possibilities are. So for me, I don't do a lot of standard divinations, what people would consider standard. I no longer really work with the tarot that much or do anything else that would require manipulating instruments. I do mostly intuitive readings with the people who are there now. And this is something that people who follow African diaspora religions like I do, we do a lot of it, and we don't really talk about it. We're doing it all the time when we talk to people. But they also expect us sometimes to use something, to throw the bones, to throw the cowrie shells, or to do one of the other divinations associated with that particular system. But I find it's just a lot easier for me to just generally get a feeling of the person's energy right there as they are right then. And I will tell you that something that you taught me in the divination class that we had last year, which was very helpful, is to face away from the person, to not look at the person, and to, of course, have as little information as possible beforehand. But that has tremendously increased, I think, my ability to pinpoint very minute details about what is going on with the person. The whole system that I work with, it is really about balancing the energy that is going on around the person at a time. It's not about predicting whether the tall, dark, handsome stranger is going to be there. So, I will admit it freely, a lot of times I dress like Miss Cleo, but I am not Miss Cleo. So I am not going to, call me now for your free reading indeed. But, no, that's not what I do. And and people are sometimes a little disappointed when they come to me because they're expecting me to pull out the cards or to pull out something. But when I don't pull out anything, they actually seem to be more pleased with the final results when I just am working directly with the energy that's swirling about them at that moment.
Well, it's interesting because the thing that's come through here is that all four of us are reading the now and not the future. When someone comes to me, that's exactly what I do, Morgan. I say, please don't face me, don't look at me, don't do anything. For me, the aspect of necromancy is huge in a reading. I'm reading who is around them right now. I'm reading what's going on with the disincarnate that are attracted into their area of energy right now. These things are all really a huge part of the way that I read, but I don't want any previous information. People will send me an email that says, I want a reading, and then I see it has 5 more paragraphs, and I don't read any of that because I don't want to know. It gets completely in the way. And I will sit there and I will say, don't look at me, and I'll say, who is this person, and I'll give them a name or a very exacting description of who I'm seeing in front of them. Not like, you have an uncle whose name starts with a vowel or a consonant. No, none of that crap. Or someone who was older died. None of that crap. So,
do you know anybody with a name that starts with an alphabet?
Yeah, with a letter of the alphabet. You notice how when you see people do that, and I've said this before, it's never X, V, or Z.
Yep.
They never say, I'm getting a feeling that somebody is in front of you whose name starts with a Q. They never say that. It's all nonsense. So what I will do is I'll say, who is the person who is extremely short and had spiky blonde hair and has a high-pitched laugh? I mean, this is not, you have someone in your life whose name started with an M. So, because I see them before I hear them most often, in terms of my readings, they're very deeply involved in necromancy. And I had an interesting experience, I think about 10 days ago, with somebody I was reading. And, Victor, I wanted to share this with you especially. A woman came to me, and we did this on Skype, actually, and she said to me, I'm feeling very plagued. And I said, stop talking. And I said to her, who is this woman who constantly is touching her forehead, like over and over, tapping her forehead? And it's like a strange habit. And I described her to a T because I could see her. Even through Skype, she was standing right there. And she said to me, oh, he called you. And I said, who called you? Who called me? And she was convinced that her husband, who I still don't know who that is, had called me and told me that her aunt was on her deathbed and that she had just passed, and that this woman is refusing to accept the woman's death. And this is a very profound moment for her. And I said, well, she must be disincarnate because I can see her. I don't usually see the living, standing alongside of you in this way. And she was angry at me. She said that I had set this up with her husband and that I had put her in a position to be vulnerable. Since then, she's come back to me and apologized for that and said, obviously I know that wasn't the case, and she was in her moment of trauma. But, Victor, I know you work with a lot of people who are in the moment of passing or around people who are in the moment of passing. Do people ever ask you to give them information or see if there's any kind of enlightenment that you can offer them about? Sometimes they say where the person's going or or what will happen? Do you ever experience that?
Not really. Normally when I'm called into those situations, it's more to be of comfort to the family and to help facilitate the transition and to make it more of a closure, at least a physical closure for the people who are present. So it's not so much in terms of contacting the about to be disincarnate or bringing any information forward. It's more just bringing closure to the family and allowing them to energetically release their grip and their hold on the person who's about to transition.
So you're working in the moment of what's happening there.
Always, yeah. That's my calling also.
Yeah,
Everything that's
I know it is.
the now. It's always the now.
Mm-hmm.
It's never the future. It's always the now. Because quite frankly, for most people, the now determines the future.
Well, it certainly does, and most people don't know that. And it sounds odd to say that most people don't know that, but the fact is that most people don't. So many clients say to me, I want you to tell me if I'll be married in 5 years, and or this kind of thing. And usually when they say things to me like that, they're in a really sort of caustic or abrasive place. And I'll say things to them like, well, you've got to get divorced from this one first, because I can see that that's where they are. So people come into the world of divination. They seek readers who will tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah.
I am absolutely sure of that because the data has proven that to me. So many times people have said to me, that's not what I wanted you to tell me. That's not what I want. And I will say to them, well, the place that you stand in, the now, where you are in this moment, is providing the data that says to me that this is where you're going. So how much of divination is, in a sense, pre-sorcery in the moment, saying, if you don't fix this or you don't make these changes, then what rolls out of this is going to be something that you don't like. And I would think that, Morgan, you come across a lot of this reading the way that you do. Can Morgan hear me? Did we lose Morgan?
Morgan.
No, I'm here, Sorceress. Hi, I'm here. You were breaking up a bit.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Do you want me to ask the question again?
Yeah, please.
Sure. I was thinking that in the work that you do and the way that you work, you come across a lot of people who want specific things to happen in the future, because you and I both work sorcery, so to speak, and that they are not really interested in hearing so much about the now, but in this moment of the now, you have to explain to them that if they are going to live in this kind of thing right now, this is what is likely to happen. I'm sure you come across a lot of that.
All the time. And that's it's the hardest thing to try to explain to them, okay, I know what you want to happen, and I know that you think that I can maybe change this, that you want to happen will happen. If that energy isn't with you right now, if that's not where you're supposed to be going, and you don't have the tools to actually make it happen yourself, then all I can do is slightly alter the path around you and alter the path for you. But I can't actually enforce it, and the biggest thing is I can't make it stick. What I can sometimes do is make it temporarily. I can give you a temporary satisfaction. I can give you the temporary situation that you think you, but you don't have what it takes to keep that energy moving yourself. You're not going to be able to maintain what I've given you. It's like Chris said before about becoming crutches. And that's what a lot of times when they're looking for us for divinations, they want everything. They want us to, A, tell them what's wrong, B, tell them how we're going to fix it, and C, make sure that nothing bad ever happens. And they want it all done in 1, 10, or 11 card tarot spread, and that's all there is to it. And I'm here to help you. I'm not here to do the job for you.
Well, do you say to your clients, do you say that? Do you say what you just said now? Do you make that clear what the purpose of the interaction is?
I do. I maybe not quite as succinctly as I did now, shall we say. I may be a little more diplomatic because a lot of times people are in distress. It's not, I don't do love work, so I don't get into all of that with the people who just want whoever the person is who lives down the lane coming over to their house in the middle of the night and ravishing them or whatever they want. Right. I do stuff with people who really have severe issues with people they think are attacking them, or severe dependency issues, whether it's dependency on other people or dependency on substance abuse. And that's where it gets down to where I have to have a heart-to-heart with them and let them know that even though I can provide temporary help and provide guidance with some of this and help set you on the path, I can't keep you on the path. That's always going to be up to them.
Right. Do you do follow-up sorcery for them or follow-up work in voodoo for them?
Yeah, I do. What I do often is, I guess you could call it case checks or spot checks with some of these people, because a lot of times my work involves giving them something, giving them a talisman, or giving them something to work with. And I'm very adamant that they have to be the ones to continue that energy. So even though I've seen that, yes, this potential path will work for you, working with the energy divination that we do right from the onset, they're the ones who have to take the energy from me and carry it. But I do, sometimes I will call them to see how they're doing. Most of the time, though, I leave the door open for them to come back to me, because if I start calling everybody that I work with, well, pretty soon I'm not going to have any time in the day left for myself, because I'm always going to be following up with people. So I leave the door open so that they have that opportunity and that option.
You know, when I started working with the Nothing, which was more than 20 years ago, I got really good at what I do, because the things that got in the way was the stuff that was in my hands. And I found that it was very interesting that I had a lot of clients who came to me and said, well, this isn't a real reading, this is a conversation. You're not throwing cards, you're not throwing shells, you're not doing any of those things. And I find that very interesting. So these other methods that I've been taught, using dice and dominoes and coins and this manner of other device, and that I've been teaching this work as well, sometimes someone will say to me, I can't focus on this reading unless you have something in your hand, so I'll pick up one of those things. And of course, the dice or the dominoes or the coins are the one that I have the most respect for because of the way that it was taught to me, and I'll tell you about that. Sometimes I'll have these devices nearby, and I'll even sometimes give them, if I have a lot of them and I'm not going to take them back, to the client to handle, to throw the dice for themselves, this kind of thing. Because I feel that some people have a real strong idea about what it means to go for a reading. Sometimes people will say to me, I've been to 10 psychics. And I say, in your life or in this month? And the answer is more often, over the last few months I've been to 10 psychics and none of them will tell me the answer that I want to hear, or none of them will tell me that so-and-so will be mine or whatever. And Morgan, interestingly enough, as you well know, I don't do love magic either. And I call it love magic. I don't even know what else to call it. I do not do relationship sorcery. I will, on occasion, work with someone who has not been able to find a partner and help them with their own issues, their own blocks, the things that are stopping them from going out into the world and meeting people. But I will not bring the guy from down the lane to your bed. It's not going to happen. So doesn't mean I couldn't. It means that I choose not to. I find that work boring and temporary, and I find it outside the realm of that which interests me in terms of sorcery. But a lot of people come to us with those questions. So what do you do if you don't do that work? What do you do with those questions? I mean, Chris, you have any thoughts on that? I would love to hear everybody's thoughts on that. Victor, too. I mean, I want to get in some time with Victor before he checks out for the night.
Well, let Victor in, because it isn't going to be a whole lot longer.
Right.
Let's not use the word check out. Let's not use the word check out, please.
Oh, sorry. I have so many other words for that phenomenon that one is not the one that I usually use for that particular phenomenon. Let me revise. I'd like to talk to Victor before he needs to get off the air tonight and on to other matters during a happy, healthy next 25 or 35 or 45 years of his life. Go ahead, Victor, you were saying.
Thank you very much. Thank you for rephrasing that for me.
Sure.
It's interesting. I counsel a lot of people who have who are struggling with relationships. And what I say to them, and I say, relationship is like charity. It starts at home. You want to be in love, or you want to find love, you have to find that love in yourself first. Because if you don't find yourself that love in yourself first, you're never going to find the partner who's going to love you the way you want to be loved. And that's really what it comes down to for a lot of the people that I talk to about that. But just getting back to that question about having some type of a device or some type of a focal point in the process of a reading, I think people traditionally have seen in popular media, at psychic fairs, and things of this nature, that the readers have cards, that the readers use a crystal, that the readers use a pendulum, that the readers use some type of mechanical or physical device as a focal point for generating the reading. Now, there's a lot of genuine, wonderful readers out there who will use something like that, and that's their focal point. That gets them started, the tarot card or whatever it is, the genuine ones. But there's a lot of phonies out there who do the same thing, and I think it's very hard for people to differentiate between the genuine reader and the phony reader until they meet someone who really is walking the walk and talking the talk and doing the work in the way that we're talking about tonight, doing the work responsibly, doing the work so that the outcome of the reading is working in the now to have them address and change and heal what's not functioning in their lives right now so that they can move on to better things in the future. So I know a lot of people do that, but it's funny, when I started working with energy and divination, I actually started using not cards, but I started using crystal. And as I went along, I recognized and realized that I didn't need the crystal, that the crystal is basically just a focal point, and that focal point exists within me and within the energy field that I'm working in. And so I'm talking 30 years ago. So at that point, I was able to walk away from anything physical or external to myself. But, it's for me, it's always been about the now, about healing, and healing yourself in the now, healing the issues in your life in the now, so that you can step into the future ready, fresh, and embracing what's to be.
That's not the style that I work in, but I will tell you, Victor, that it is an enormous gift that you give to people when you do that. Because the counseling is such a huge part of the process. And to hear that from someone with compassion is a powerful thing. Do people come back to you again later and tell you how things are going? Do you ever have that experience?
Many times they do. That's one of the gratifying things is when someone comes back and says, you know what, I had a different approach before I spoke with you, and I changed the approach after I spoke with you, and things have been much better and much improved for me. And when I hear that's telling me two things. Number one, I have the gratitude coming back, which makes me feel good, obviously. And number two, it's reinforcing that I'm doing it the right way.
That is very gratifying. People come back to me over and over, and they say, "Oh, I did what you suggested, or I did what came from the reading, and this great thing happened, and that great thing happened, or I didn't do it, and terrible things happened." And I get that kind of thing all the time. Chris, do you get people who come back and talk to you about stuff that you've said to them? Does that happen in your world?
I had a couple people that did that came back and said, "Hey, what you said was, right on, and that really helped me out, and I really appreciate it. And I want you to look at this."
Yeah. So they want more.
Right. And I'm like you guys. I don't do anything that has to do with love. It's like, go call Dr. Ruth, or go call the one with the fancy hair and the white fingernails. She'll go take care of you. I don't do that shit.
Please. Oh, please.
As far as like a tool, like I said, I use the runes, but the way I do them is I let the people that are going to use them handle them. Because I tell them the thing is, I'm reading you. I'm reading what's happening in your world. You're the one that has to put something in there for me to read. I'm not going to do it.
That's interesting. So for you, they are some sort of transitional object as well as a focus object.
And a lot of times it's just to make them feel like you're doing something. I mean, to people like us, we can sit down and just do things without looking at cards and stones and
right, sure,
stuff like that. But for the general public, I think they need that reassurance that you're doing something. It's like when I was working on trucks, when I doing that for a living, it's like if I just went out with a computer and I hooked it up to somebody's truck and I punched a couple buttons and the damn thing ran fine, they'd look at me like I was crazy because I didn't take any of my tools out. What the hell could I have done in that little bit of time? Because everybody's used to you have to do something. You have to go through these procedures in order for it to work. And a lot of what we do is in their head as far as processing the information that we give them. If I tell you that, hey, I think you ought to go and open up that business that you're looking at, you want to do a flower shop, I think you've got a good idea. I think the property you're looking at is perfect, but I don't give them something to believe in. I'm no different than their next door neighbor telling it to them.
I see. So you think that they have some kind of marker of the event in their mind that they're going to experience when they get there? Yeah.
Like we use a trigger. We use a trigger for sorcery for some of the things that we do. And I think people need that trigger for them to think about it, that it's there, it's been implanted, that, okay, this is what I got to do. Why? Well, because the card said so. It isn't so much what I said, it's what they say.
Right.
The funny guy with tattoos and long hair, no, it's what the cards told them to say, or what the runes said. Right,
and if you don't provide those things, some people say, like someone said to me once, this was not a reading, this was a conversation. And I say, well, before you started this conversation, did you know more or less about what you know now? And they say, well, I learned quite a bit in this conversation. And I said, well, then therefore it is a reading. And that kind of thing is prevalent because I am now known for reading with the nothing. But there's two things that I want to say about devices and objects, and I don't want to start a story and lose Victor in the middle. Are you going to be here for a few more minutes, Victor, or are you heading out?
Actually, I was just about to say that I'm going to have to get going, but I just want to conclude my contribution by saying the word empowerment seems to be central for me in any event in the work that I do. And if someone leaves me empowered to make an effective change in their life, then I've done the job that I was meant to do.
Indeed. Victor, next week, I hope to see you and hear from you.
I should be, yes. I absolutely will be with you next week, yes.
Okay, thank you. Say hello to your family for me.
Thank you very much. And Chris and Morgan and Sorceress, thank you all very much for allowing me to participate, and have a wonderful night.
Of course. Thank you, Victor.
See you later, Victor.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Have a great night, Victor.
Thank you.
I want to tell a story about a woman who came to me for a reading in Manhattan about, last time I was living there, which was not quite a few years ago, but a bunch of years ago. And she came in and I said, well, sit in the chair and face away from me as I do and all that. And she said, oh, no. She was adamant. She's like, I know what a reading really is. I did not come here for nonsense. And I looked at her and I looked around the room and I said, okay. I'm going to give you an object that's in the room that I want you to work through as we talk. So I went into another room and I got one of those ugly dolls. You know what they are? Those stuffed things with the weird eyes. I said to her, now I want you to hold this very close to your chest while we're talking. Very close. And I did the reading as I would always do the reading, and it was very good and very strong and exacting and full on, and here we were, and information was being shared, and at the end of the reading, she handed it back to me as if it was made of, glass and so careful. And she said, here's your object. And I said to her, well, you know what, to tell you the truth, the person who was here before you just left it here. It has nothing to do with me. And I decided to tell her that because I wanted her to understand that her own ambivalence towards the kind of thing that I was about to do would have gotten in the way any other way. And she looks at me, and I think she's going to laugh it off or something, and she said, well, then it was meant to be. And I said, what was meant to be? She said, this is now the object that I need as my focus object so that I can move forward. And can I have it? And I said, sure. Take it with you if it makes you happy. About 6 or 7 weeks, I remember it was just sort of 2 months later, she called me and she said, everything is going really well. We're working really hard together. And I said, who is we? And she said, myself and Hector. So I'm thinking she met someone or whatever. And I'm listening to her. I said, wait a minute, who is Hector? And she said, Hector is the god that lives in the doll that you gave me. So she got this entire story involved around this object that I had put in her hands, because she had to have something in her hands, or either she did or I did. That was obviously what her requirement. And she took it to a whole other place and identified divination with this doll. So people have these very strong attachments to how it's supposed to look when we do this work. And when I think of how I learned the coins, and anyone who's read the book Divination knows this story, but I will just very briefly share it. When I was in Scotland the last time, there was a woman on the street in High Street, and every area has something called a High Street. It's like the main street with all the little shops on it. When I first went to Scotland, I thought it was the name of the street, but it isn't really. It's the High Street in each town. And the town I was living in, I was on the High Street, and I had been there dozens of times. And there was an old woman who was sitting there busking. She, had a little thing in front of her for people to put coins in, and there, some of the coins are worth a lot more than they are here, so that was an interesting thing to see. And she and I made eye contact right away in a very profound way, as if we had done this 1,000 times. And I'm not the kind of person who is likely to sit down on the sidewalk on a street with someone. It's just not in me to do that, and I felt compelled to do it. And I saw her this one time, and I was rushing. I was with my daughter, and we had to go somewhere. And I felt like when I separated from her, our eyes were still attached in some way. The next time I was there, I saw her again, and I sat down with her, and I said, what? What is it that you want to tell me? And she just looked at me in this kind of silence for a minute, which was wonderful. She's quite old. I would say that if I had to guess, I would say that this was a woman in her upper 90s, or maybe in her 80s, who had lived a life of a lot of exposure. And she just sat there and looked at me, and there was no coins in her little tray. And she looked at me and looked at me and looked at me, and as she did, people started throwing coins in, as if she had ordered them. And she picked them up, and she said, I'm going to show you something. And you can show it to other people, but they have to show reverence to the coins. They have to. And she gave me a whole list of sort of rules and regulations around this thing. I didn't write about all of them in the book. And we talked about how important this was. And she showed me this technique with the coins, and that technique is in the book. And after spending what I thought was about a half hour with her, I looked around, and it was almost sundown, and I had gotten there at about 11 in the morning, and even in Scotland, that's a lot of hours. So I had probably sat on that sidewalk for 4 or 5 hours in this almost delicious, trance-like state of learning from this woman. In Scotland, there are a lot of gypsies on the street, and she was, in fact, and truly honoring the word gypsy when I say this, she was, in fact, an elder in her group, and I came to know who she was later on and was so overwhelmed by the fact that she was even sitting there with me. And she said to me, the first thing she said to me was, I recognized you immediately. So, in my ego, I'm thinking that means that she has the Blood Sorcery Bible, because at that time I think that was out already. And I said, oh, you have my book? And she said, no, in this kind of like silly you way. And I said, oh, she says, no, I recognize you from all the times we've done this before. And it was very clear that we had some kind of very long-term connection. But she taught me the coins, and she was adamant about the steps, and she was very clear and exacting. And then she said to me, and you know it's all nonsense, right? And I said, what's all nonsense? And she said, you don't need the coins. But if you're going to use them, you have to use them respectfully. So it was very interesting to have that experience with somebody of this kind of knowledge, this kind of sort of ancient attachment to what divination actually is. I was startled and pleased and excited to be part of that process. And then the next time that I went back, we looked at each other, and she just looked away. And it occurred to me that she had given me what she wanted to give me. We were done. Not in the rude way, not in the way that that meant that I couldn't continue seeing her and saying hello to her and this sort of thing, but that the information had been passed. So the use of coins to me is a very sorcery-related kind of divination because it comes from that place, and it comes from that, as Victor was saying, very empowering moment, a moment where I felt a lot of respect being shared in the work. So I'm asking both of you, how did you learn to do what you do? And we could talk about a lot of this because I've been doing this as far as I know my whole life. But how did you know? How did you learn to do this work? What was the switch that flipped, or was it one? Were you born like that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think I was. Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris, but I think it somehow seems to be something that I've done most of my life, and I think my parents both do it too. So whether they taught me and I just picked up on it from a very young age, somewhat like walking, or whether it was something that, some innate ability. I've talked about this a little bit before, that I think for some of us, whether it's seeing the dead or working with demons or even being able to perceive how the energy is flowing in what we call divination, I think there may be a genetic component to it. Not that we can't all do it. I think most humans can do all these things, but in some of us that switch seems to be on at birth. And so when I started learning techniques like tarot cards, it seemed like something something that came very naturally to me. And the other systems did too, but what I learned fairly early on by my mid to late teens was that I was doing just as well without all these props as I was with them. So even though I still used the cards once in a while, because clients did like to have them, I didn't really need them. I stopped using them. And basically I could throw any spread on the table in front of me, and sometimes the cards had significance with the energy that I was picking up from them. Sometimes they didn't, but I was kind of looking down but not even seeing the cards. I was actually focusing mostly on the energy that was coming into me. And finally I decided, well, why am I even using these props? They're very nice to look at. I'm fascinated by the different decks that are out there, and they're nice to collect, but I don't think they're very useful as a practical tool for doing this kind of work.
So when you say they're not useful, do you feel that they are in some way that they get in the way, that they can't act as a focus object for you? What do you think about that?
No. When I say not useful, I say that simply because even though I probably could use them with some degree of accuracy, why bother? It's like saying a physician needs to have a scalpel on top of a scalpel in order to perform surgery. You've already got the fine bladed point right there in your hand. You don't need an extension of it. It's not going to necessarily make it more effective. If your motor control is great, then yes, you could still go in there with that surgeon precision and cut out the cyst or cut out whatever you need to do or perform whatever manipulation within the body you need to. But is it really necessary to have that extension, or is it better to just have that original scalpel in your hand and get your hand down in there and get your hand dirty and do the work directly?
Well, I think that is a very personal question, because I have met some great readers who do need a device, and I've met some really awful readers who try to do it without a device, in that sense of guesswork that we joke about all the time. You meet a 21-year-old woman who said the first thing she says to you is that she's single, and and someone says to her, oh, so you're looking for a mate, or, it's kind of nonsense. And I always use my fake whisper voice when I make fun of people like that, and unapologetically so. So, for some people, do you think that it is a necessary thing?
Yeah, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because some people, I think, are pre-programmed to have that in their mind that, I can't do it without this, whether they are the reader or the person being read. I know I've met people who do the divinations from Africa who use the seashells. This is an incredibly complex system, but it's based on something that's very, very basic. You have seashells that are formed in a way, they're the traditional cowrie shells, and there's the closed side, and then what they do to prepare them is they slip a thin blade through and pop off the rounded back, so they call that the open side. And if you look at a cowrie, it looks like a mouth. It really doesn't. They're saying these are the mouths of the spirits, so they throw them down, and depending on how many open side shells up or how many closed side shells show up, that determines the pattern. I think there are something like 256 patterns which they have to memorize. But other diviners use a different technique. They use something called the opuele, which is a chain that has 8 medallions on it, and they're like coins. Either they land head side up or tail side up. But again, the pattern depends on how many land head side up or tail side up. And others use something as simple as a coconut. They take 4 pieces of coconut fresh from the shell, and they'll throw it on the ground. And there's either the white side, which is the inside flesh of the coconut, or there's a brown side when you pulled it right out of the coconut, a little membrane where it has been sticking to the actual shell of the coconut. And depending on how many dark or white sides come up, that's the pattern. But it's all basically, for me, I think this is fascinating because it's all based on the binary system. It really is the binary system when you think about it. And it's a technique for reading the energy and what is the energy telling you. The simplest way and yet the most elegant and complex way you can get information in is through binary code. So,
it's the math. It's the math of divination that can be very interesting. When you talk about that, you really are talking about the math of divination. You said that you were born with it, and I know that because we've talked about this. And you also said you think everyone can do it. Is that what you said? I think that's what you said.
Yeah. I think everyone has the potential to be able to do it, but I think most people do not do it, do not ever access this. And there may be some people who simply don't have that ability for whatever reason, but I really do believe there's a genetic component that some of us are born with the ability, those genes are activated to be able to do it, and some of us don't have those genes activated and maybe have to figure out a workaround. They have to figure out different ways to read the energy, but they could potentially get the same results that we do.
Chris, do you think everyone's born with it?
I think to a point they are, and I think what makes us different is because we didn't listen to anybody when they said you can't do that. You can have all the ability in the world until somebody puts doubt in your head, and then it all goes to hell. And that can be proven with anything. I mean, any kind of ability, you have a couple people tell you, you don't know how to do that. I mean, that's the easiest way to defeat somebody is get inside their head. Well, if you look at the upbringing that most people have, and it's, how many years of being pounded into your head that you shouldn't do things like this and you can't do things like this because you're not divine and all this other kind of stuff. And if you do this, it's witchcraft, and you're going to go to hell, which is one of the biggest brainwashing schemes in the world. You take away people's ability to do that. I mean, nobody can do it if you're afraid to do it. That's the biggest thing. If you look at the people that do this, 90% of the people are the people that say, no, I'm going to do it anyway. We do things that nobody else wants to do or thinks they can do. Because we're the ones that sit there and say, well, okay, I can't do that. Well, why not? Or what do you mean I can't?
I cannot agree here. I think that not everyone can do it. And I used to think everyone could do it. I honestly did. Maybe 20 years ago, I thought everyone could do it. Maybe not do it so efficiently. Maybe just get bits and pieces of the stuff. But because I have an extraordinarily active practice in this thing, and I've met, I cannot tell you, it's probably in the thousands of people that I've read. I really now do not think everyone can do it. I think that there are people who are born into this world who are what I refer to as a singular dimension. And that's not an insult. It means that they are very attached to, very built for, very geared towards what goes on in the day-to-day of this world in this time right now. And that they have, because they are that way, some agreement of how it all is, what the rules are, what you do, what the steps of your life are. You graduate from this, you graduate from that, you get married, you do these kinds of things. And I'm not disparaging that in any way. I'm not saying that that is not a valid way to live, but I do think that the data has shown me that there are many, many people who just cannot do this, who have no talent for it, if you want to put it that way, who have no ability to reach past what they see. And the more people I meet like that, the more I'm sure of the theory. When people come to me who are of that type of individual, and I'm reading stuff and I say something which to me is so obvious in their energy that I think, the guy driving by in the ice cream truck could have seen it. And they say, how did you know that? I mean, I work so hard to keep that covered up or to not share that information. It is that kind of response. It's that kind of reaction to the knowledge that we perceive through our work and in some ways so easily, that sort of shock value that leads me to think that there are many people who cannot do this. And that that's been the experience that I've had. There's somebody that I want to talk to who's been in the chat room, and then I want to talk about, can we read ourselves? Morgan, you had mentioned that there's somebody in the chat room with a question. Do we want to put him on the air?
Yes, I think we can. So if you've been listening, we are ready to go. And let me just work a little magic here, but this is technology, not magic. And therefore it is less reliable than magic. So
there you go. There you go.
There we go. Let's see if he is going to be live. He should be live soon. Okay. It says he's live, so let's see if we can. Tin, can you hear me, Mr. Tin Roof, or Ms. Tin Roof? Hello?
Can you hear me?
There we go. There we go.
There we go.
Can you hear us, Tin?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Did you have a question? I mean, it's interesting to have a caller on the air because this is something we had not intended to do until January. But I was kind of inspired to hear your voice. So, what is your question?
Well, my question was, I was wondering if divination good for just having like a general checkup to be sure that one is staying on whatever path that they're on, and how often should they do that, and, should they just like do it once every 6 months or once a year, or should they just do it whenever they feel like they need a checkup? They don't necessarily have to have a problem.
Right. That's a really good question, and it is my experience that when one suddenly feels a need for a checkup, that there is some tiny bit of discourse somewhere within the cell.
Yeah.
That people don't usually just step out the door and say, "Hey, I think I'll just have all my parts checked." There's always some sort of underlying. You know what I'm saying? There's some kind of underlying question, and I think that having a checkup about whether the path is working for someone is an extraordinarily interesting question, because if the path is absolutely working, then two things should be happening. The path should be providing the information that is necessary, and the path itself should be gratifying in a way that makes one want to go to the path that they're on to look for the kind of information that they need. And if I may say this about you, if you don't mind, what's happening is that the path that you've been on, that you become very used to, it's starting to feel like it's not paying off in the way that you want it to pay off, but yet it has a kindness about it that you like. Yes. And that is a comfort zone for you. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of earlier life doctrine that you heard about using darker energies and this kind of thing that are not comfortable for you.
Yes, that's correct.
So therefore, you're staying in this path and you're sort of looking for it to provide new inspiration, and it's not. Mm-hmm. So is that what's happening?
Yes, and then I'm having doubts. I'm having some doubts.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If you're having doubts because it's not paying off. And let me be clear about what I mean by paying off.
Yes.
When one has a path of any kind, you step into it because you want to be able to rely on it. It's like your path should, in a sense, have your back. And it should be able to provide you with clarity and joy and prosperity, and not just at the financial level, but prosperity of feeling an excitement about your work, about your life. It should be able to help you connect to things. It should be intriguing. It should be terribly, terribly intriguing. And it should make you have to think outside the box, even within the tenets of the path itself. What's happening to you is that you are sticking with the icons of it, maybe, and just forgive me as I use some generalities, maybe the candles and the images and the things that go with this path. And you continue to go to them, and nothing is changing. But you have a sentimentality about the path. Is that what's happening?
Yes, and some things happen, but it's so slow. Yeah,
it shouldn't be. That's not what this path does. This path should never deliver the right path for you. Should never deliver in such a fashion where you say, well, maybe that was going to happen anyway because it took so long. The reason that we step outside of the agreements that most people have, which is that power is outside of themselves and assigned either to the universe or to a higher power or to another being, the reason that we step outside of that is because what we're saying is we want more. We want to acknowledge the energy that we have, the control that we have, the power that we have. We want to be participants in our own team.
Yes.
And if the path that you're involved in is not giving you that, and it seems like another thing that's going on with you is you're reading the same stuff over and over and over, and that's frustrating to you. So is that happening?
Yeah, that is. But I do have to admit, too, that, even though I'm looking in other areas, I'm still working on myself about not being fearful about things. Yeah. Well, I have my students have heard this a million times, but I'll share it with you. I have an idea about what fear is, and they're all. I'm sure all of my students right now are saying it before I even say it. Fear is not a real thing. Fear is two things. It's a moment of inconvenience and not knowing what to do, next. That's what fear is. That's what it is. And I use this example. If you were standing in an alley and someone came at you with a weapon, well, if you break that down, if you slow it down and you see what it is, it's a moment of inconvenience because now whatever your next plan was is in some way damaged by this process. You'll be late. You might not get there. Things could go badly. And you don't know what to do next. You don't know if you should fight, if you should run away, if you should fall down. You don't know what to do. So there's no circumstance under which the thing that we label as fear is broken down in any other way other than those two things. So if you have questions, here's what we can do. Morgan will give you my email address, and you can send your questions to me because you were so gracious to come on the radio tonight and chat with us, and I appreciate that. And I will answer your questions for you, and we can have that exchange back and forth. And my one request is that you don't edit yourself, is that you tell me, ask the questions you really want to ask. Because there's a politeness in you, there's a sense in you that makes you not want to rock too many boats.
but that's, you got to rock the boats if you want to work on a path, or if you want to expand yourself and find other stuff that's going to be helpful to you. You have to get in there and be the wave and rock the boat.
Yes, okay.
Was that helpful to you?
Yes, it was very helpful.
Good. And I expect an email from you, and I expect to stand by you and help you with that.
Okay, I do. I appreciate it very much.
Of course. And I hope you'll hang in here for the rest of the show tonight.
Oh, I will.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, Morgan. Thank you for bringing her in. That was great.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So that was a great example of somebody struggling with that particular issue, of what the path is and how we figure out what to do. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it was very telling that she had asked the question originally, and my feeling is when you're on the path, it's not something that I would recommend necessarily doing at any periodic schedule. It's not like going in and changing the oil in a car. When we're living the path, and it's true to us, and it rings true to us, and it's down in our core, and it really, really, really is resonating with us, we automatically know when something is throwing a wrench in that, when something is throwing it off kilter. So it's not a matter of doing divination. It's a matter of trusting our instincts. But I understand why she's in that position. A lot of people were. I was, too, in my younger days. So it's you feel like you almost want to say, well, can I do divination? Because you're almost asking permission of the path that you're on to doubt it. You're saying, is it okay if I have some doubts and do a double check? And the minute you do have those doubts and you feel the need to do a double check, that's telling me that there's something wrong, and that's what I have to tell a lot of people all the time.
I have a friend who is a practitioner of Tibetan medicine, and he was telling me a story about a woman he was friends with who had a baby and called him and said, I just had this baby, and I want you to see him and make sure he's okay. And my friend, who is not giving me permission to say his name on the air, so I'll just say my friend. My friend said to her, well, what's wrong with the baby? Oh, nothing. The baby's fine. I just, you've been my doctor in a case, and then I want to. And he said to her, there is no possibility that you just want to check this out. You must have an instinct that something is not right. And she said, well, the baby's not really focusing his eyes. And the story goes on and on, but the point of the story is that he was able to say to her that you don't just check in that often. People don't do that. They check in when they feel that there's something that needs to be looked at. And that was what I was expressing to this lovely woman, Tin, who shared with us that she was, in fact, that what I was saying to her was, in fact, spot on, and that she was having that experience of feeling a discomfort or a dissatisfaction or anything, and therefore checking in. You don't run to a marriage counselor every 6 months or every year if your marriage is going well. You don't say, we're just stopping in to see how it's going.
Right.
So these are important kinds of things. So and I'm grateful to her. That was very nice of her to jump in like that. Readings that are cold like that are the best kind. And we've talked about that quite a bit. But what is the nothing, and what is it that I feel? When and people have had now an example of what that sounds like. What is it that I feel? And when I try to teach people or share with them what the nothing is, they say, well, will I hear a voice? Will I hear? I think that Chris uses runes, and because there's something that give him a connection to roots that are very powerful for him. But you certainly don't need them. Do you feel that way, Chris?
Yeah, I believe that I don't need them. I mean, I go by, I used to think at one time that I did, I guess when I was first learning how to do it, I would, try to read the cards, and, they didn't make sense to me from what I was reading in the book and trying to remember all that. It's like, look, this shit's more complicated than I want to really get into. So I tried to read it, and I realized that I'm not reading what's in front of me. I'm listening to what's in my head.
Right, exactly.
I have the answers. The answers are in there. It's like I'm only using this, I guess, to confirm what I already know. And then it just got to the point where it's like, okay, I don't even need this to do that. I need these I use them just so that so they have something, so it seems like we're doing something. Goes back to like what you said. It's like if I'm not using anything, then we're just having a conversation, and people don't want to pay for a conversation.
Right. And do you find that sometimes? And I've had this experience now. The amount of people that I've read, the numbers are extraordinary. So I have a lot of data. One of the most interesting things that people will do is lie, and that clients will lie. They will tell you a nonsense story, and I'm not ever sure if the general reason for that is so that they don't have to face their own stuff, or because they feel infringed upon in some way that you're new. And I will say, well, that's what you came for. You came for me to be able to tell you things. And it's very interesting to me to see that happen. I once did a video project where they put 40 or so people in the room. Maybe it was 38 people, I don't know, in a room in a nightclub. It was daytime. We were just using the room. It was quite lovely. And my job was to walk around and read people in the way that people like John Edwards pretend to do. So I walk around and I see all the dead, and I start to talk to people, and I say, I'm seeing this, what's happening? So I walk up to this young man who had to be maybe 25 years old, and I said to him, well, the person behind you is so-and-so. I heard the person's name. He told me everything about him. He was his deceased uncle. And I said, and he said, and he gave him some information. And he was standing right there. I mean, this is what I do. I'm absolutely sure of what I heard. And I looked at this young man and I said, so what does that mean to you? And he said, none of that's true. I do not have a dead uncle. It did not happen. And somebody else he was with just put her head in her hands like, I can't even believe this is happening. So I looked at her, and this was not divination. I looked at her and I said, what's this about? And she said, no, he's in denial. He doesn't. This is a real person. This is someone who's affected him deeply, and he's angry at him. So the disincarnate told me something that I repeated to this young man, and the young man stomped out, and he was furious, and how could you dare say such a thing to me, and which just proved to the room that he was in fact really having this experience. His reaction to it was so strong. But I remember that day, and I think to myself, why go? Why do people come to me so that they can hide their story? And I thought about this for years. And what it does is it gives strength to their own state of denial on an issue. And that is what they're showing to themselves in that moment. So when I say clients lie, they don't lie because they are insulted by me in some way. They don't lie because they're insulted by the process. They're lying to keep something to themselves. And they've been to 20 readers who don't know what they're doing, and they can't see it, so it doesn't matter. But yet they keep seeking someone who can find it. So sometimes it is our job to excavate something so deeply hidden, something that really needs to be chiseled out. And that really is the job in the moment. Has anybody had experiences like that, where you really had to do that kind of digging?
Oh, yeah.
I tell people flat out, don't lie to me. It's like, do not lie to me.
Yeah, you can tell them that, Chris. Good luck.
No, it's like, I will find out. I will find out exactly what you're lying to me about. And I said to one guy, who was, talking to me, and I said to him, well, I'm going to tell you one thing right now, that this is not your first name. This is your middle name. And he just looked at me. And now this is going back before you could Google whoever the hell and tell you who was what. Yeah,
sure.
And I said, this is not your real name. And he said, yeah, it is. This is my name. I said, no, this is the name you use. This is not the name, your real name. You were not born with this name as your first name. This is your middle name. And he just looked at me, and I said, don't ever think you can lie to me.
Yeah, so you gave him a truthful moment and showed him how that works.
if I don't find it out today, I will find it out later, and once I find it out, I will never work with you again.
Yeah, they do that. Clients do that. And his response was, did he come back? Was he interested in an ongoing communication with you?
Oh, yeah, he came back to me a couple of times after that. Until he got the problem that was resolved, it was had to do with money and work and things like that. But once it was done, I haven't seen him since then. But like I said, the first initial contact was, don't ever lie to me. I can tell, because as soon as you start talking, and I can tell you when you start lying, and I can tell when you stop lying, and when you start lying again.
So,
and I have.
Go ahead.
And I have been like that for years. I mean, it's going back to when I was a kid. I still remember doing that.
So, when you feel like somebody's lying to you, do you feel compelled to not continue the reading?
A lot of times, yeah. I'll call them out on it, or I'll say, I don't see any more. It's like there's nothing else there. It's all foggy. Because you're lying to me, and I can't trust on what you're saying. And once I can't trust you, I can't do a reading anymore.
It's interesting because I am really callous with people when I'm reading them and when I have to be. I am, like Morgan said, you had said something, but you probably said it more subtly to the client. As anyone who's read the book Divination knows that I might not have been any more subtle than that. I will say to people, look, you just came here for some sort of like emotional circle jerk, and I'm not interested in that. And you want somebody to tell you it's all going to be great, or you're great, or whatever it is that you want someone to tell you, and that's what I'm actually reading. And I'm actually reading is their intention on why they're there. And this is very startling to some people. And some of them will, break down their bullshit, and they will come forward in the moment and be present and want the reading. Some of them will run screaming. It's very interesting to see the difference between the kinds of people who really, really want your help and who don't. I recently had somebody come to me and say that they needed this reading to understand what their life was because they were terminally ill. And the second they walked in, the second they showed up on Skype, because I do most of my work because I have a very global clientele, I said, "You're not ill. Why would you say that?" And the individual said to me, "Oh, no, I have a terminal illness, and right now I'm raising money for." Oh, I see. Okay. So this actually turned out to be somebody who was later in the press as somebody who was doing that kind of disgusting behavior, raising money for an illness for her family, and turned out not to be ill. So I do get them all, and yet they come and they expect to not be revealed, which is what I don't understand. I mean, I'm not exactly a low-profile individual in this work. If you're coming to me, you're going to be read. Two things. Have either of you had readings? People who study psychiatry are supposed to go have therapists. Have you had readings?
Oh, yeah, I have, and it's real hard to keep a poker face during them because the readings I've had, the bad readings, I've had a couple very good readings, and they're great. It's wonderful to meet someone who can really do that, but the bad readings have been so far off the base, and even when I had people who were using cards in front of me, and I knew exactly what all the cards meant, and they couldn't even figure out what the cards meant. So I thought, well, not only does the reading you've just thrown have absolutely no bearing on my life, so you're not tapped into any energy that's surrounding me, but you can't even get the interpretation of the cards right. Maybe they have their own wild system of interpretation. It wasn't quite as off as saying, oh, well, here's the Ace of Cups, and it means you're going to be decapitated in a horrible auto accident, but it was still so far off that I just wondered how they could possibly get away with this without someone calling them out on it, and why. And this is at a store here in Atlanta where they charge, $150, $200 per hour to go in and sit down and have someone give you basically what's a sideshow cold reading. And I thought, well, I don't. It's not that difficult to do a cold reading, so I kind of wondered how they were able to get away with it for that long, because you would think that there would be enough people in that scene who would call these people out. But I think what people really want is validation for their own insecurities, and they're more than happy to pay the guy with the tarot cards rather than the guy who's going to tell you to lay on the couch.
You know, it's interesting that you say this, Martin, because people who get these terrible readings and don't say that was bullshit, I think that they are so afraid that that person who's just sat in front of them and done this act knows more about them and that they're right. I've had people come to me and say, I've had readings that have nothing to do with me, so I don't know who I am anymore. And I say, wait, what did you just say? And they'll say, yeah, people have told me things that have nothing to do with me, so I'm trying to figure out where those things fit in. I said, so wait a minute. You're telling me that you sat at a table with somebody who told you you're a giraffe and now you're looking for the long neck? Is that what's happening here? And that's pretty much, and that's the term that I use because that obviously is very clear and goes right in. And they'll say, yeah, and they told me I should explore my musical skills. I have no interest in that, and I'm really confused about that, or that I'm not straight, or like these really powerful things. And I'm saying, and you're basing what you're looking for in yourself on a bad reading. That's what's happening. And they're quite startled by that information, and I'm startled that people will do that. I'm startled that because they went to a store that has a big sign and is in a city full of witches, don't have to go any further, that everything that's said in that, 16 square miles or whatever it is, I'm making the number up, is true. It's startling to me. Then so many of those people then come to me and say, so-and-so said this and they said that. I said, just stop talking and let's get to the root of it. And I'm not saying that there aren't great readers in those places. I want to be really clear. There are great readers in those places. There are great readers and there are bad readers everywhere. But just because a reader told you something, ask them what their day job was a week ago. This is important.
I had a psychic that does animals one time. It was a gift certificate. I won at a Chinese auction at the one. I used to do volunteer work for the one golden retriever rescue, and he's like, okay. So I give him a call and have him read one of my dogs, and it's like she's going on and on about this about my dog and this is how he's down. What she didn't know was I know the beginning of my dog's life up until that point because he was a rescue dog. I have all his paperwork. He comes out of a shelter. I knew everything in the world about him. I knew intimate details that nobody else would know. Okay,
right.
So she's going through all this shit about my dog, and I'm thinking, "What are you nuts?" And she goes, "And his favorite blanket in the whole place is it's green and blue and red." And I'm thinking, well, I don't decorate that horrible, number one. And number two, there ain't a friggin' thing in my house with those colors in it together. It's like, where in the hell do you see this blanket? And I told her, I said, there's no blanket in this house that looks anything like that. I said, that has got to be one of the most god-ugly blankets that I probably would have ever saw, and I think I would remember it. Well, maybe I got the colors wrong. Well, no, maybe you got this whole thing wrong, okay? It's like, it's easy to get money off of somebody when you say this is what your dog thinks. But
that's pretty easy. Yeah, that's pretty easy.
Don't assume that everybody's, gullible. Some of us can read animals and some of us can tell what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like I'm humoring you because you gave a gift certificate and I was dumb enough to win it. It's like, don't insult me yet,
Are there pet psychics that you think are real?
Pet psychics? Or just psychics in general?
Pet psychics. Do you think that any of it's legitimate? Because we all have, I think you either have this or you don't. You can use your intuitive skill with a living thing on one level or another, or you don't. And the people who specialize in pets, I find that curious because the pet can't respond and say,
That's where I get a little funny because there's no like self-check there.
Yeah.
You know, when you're dealing with a human can look at you and go, "You're full of shit."
Right.
You know, where a dog don't know. Which on the backside of that was I practice Reiki on my dogs because I can't bullshit my dog into saying you're going to feel better once I do this to you, because it's either you feel better or you're not. So there's kind of like a give and take there. I think that I know I could read my dogs. I know I can still read my dogs. I can read my cats. I can tell what they're thinking. It's, you know. But if that's all you can do, I would seriously back up a couple of steps and re-examine your life choices.
You know, I have a funny pet psychic story that I have to tell you. There was a doctor at the chief medical examiner's office when I was there who had a big, I think it was a lab Dobie mix, which is a very strange combination anyway. And he said she is very moody and she's very this and she's very that, and he decided that he was going to see a pet psychic. I said, okay, I want all the details. I want to hear the whole thing. He scheduled the appointment. He went. It just so happened that he scheduled it during his vacation, so he was gone for like a week after that. And he came back in after work, and he took off his coat, and he had a sweatshirt with a picture of the dog's face on it. And he took out of his briefcase a stand-up photo of the dog and put it on the desk. I said, okay, what's happening here? He said, she thinks that I don't think about her when I'm leaving the house. So she's decided, I told her that I now have these things with her face on it, and I will think about her all day long. And he even had a keychain with the dog's face on it. And I said, really? And the dog knows this? And he said, yes, because the psychic said that the dog stays home and scratches and pulls her hair out and all these things because she thinks while I'm at work I forget to think about her. And I said, and you paid for this information? And he said, yeah. And I said, every single one of our dogs does the following thing. You leave the house, whether it's to go downstairs and get something out of your car or go away for 3 days, they are flipping out. They want you to come back. That's all they know. They're not sitting there thinking you're not thinking about them during the day. And he said, you know, this pet psychic said to me, that this is a common problem, and she tells this to a lot of her clients. So there was this sort of go-to, I guess, preconceived packet of bullshit that this individual was peddling, and that is what they decided that was the common healing mechanism. And I thought, how sad for both of them, because this isn't going to change anything with the dog's anxiety, and it might even be medical, and maybe that wasn't even checked out. But to that point, we do all have a sensation of feeling about our animals, especially the ones that we live with, that we have a connection to. But the scams are terrifying. People lose real opportunity in their life. I'm sure people do damage to themselves and worse over bad readings. I mean, Morgan, have you encountered anyone who's been in a terrible reading or had that kind of experience?
Oh, yeah. They've come to me and they've had bad readings and come to me because the person just does readings. This is what they typically say. Hey, well, they just do readings. They don't do any work. So, in other words, they don't do anything to protect or alter. And so they'll come to me. They say they've got these horrible things and they've been told they have a curse on them or whatever. Yes. I didn't think that still happened. I really didn't, but apparently it still does.
It does. A friend of mine who's dealing with a blood disorder, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, I just want to say this, went to somebody who told him, and this was only maybe 8 months ago, said that the woman said to him, and he said he was not well, so he told her that. And she says, oh, your disease is a curse that's on you, and, it's a complex thing to take off. So for $10,000, ... the rest of it.
Oh, yeah. So I typically charge them less than they charged for the reading that put them into the state to begin with, and all I'm doing is trying to make them feel a little bit more secure. But I've had people come to me and actually defend the bad reading. They say, well, I'm sure this person is really talented, and maybe he got my stuff wrong, but I don't think that if you are in that sort of have that sort of ability that you could do it and see 7 or 8 people in a day. So I'm sure he doesn't put all of his ability into it. He couldn't possibly, because he would burn out, and therefore I accept that he won't be getting some things right. And I look at them and say,
wow,
you are paying. Would you go to a doctor and say, well, this has got to be burning people out, so only cure half the disease? Or would you go to a mechanic and say, well, only replace one of the 4 flat tires? They just don't get it.
Or a dentist with a drill in his hand, right?
Yeah, they don't seem to get it. They're so intent on defending everything they've heard that they would rather give this person the benefit of the doubt and not even think, well, maybe this person doesn't have any ability whatsoever, and that's why he is able to see 8 people a day.
People are defending their own choice to go. That's what they're doing, and they're saying, in the language of defending the reader, they're defending their own choice to have gone there to begin with. I have a question. Can people read themselves? Because I have one client who's always drawing cards on herself. It's just, I pulled a card today, and it told me that, I should not have sex with my boyfriend because, it'll cause him to think that it's just easy to walk in and out of my life. And I was like, you got that from one card you pulled from your own deck? All right. So do you think we can read ourselves?
Nah, I personally, no. I think you're too biased in your opinion. I mean, it's hard to look at yourself and judge. I think you kind of need that disconnect that you get when you're doing it for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at yourself, you kind of, you get that idea that you want it to go a certain way. I mean, even if you don't think that you do, subconsciously, you're thinking about why you're pulling the card. You know the meaning of it, whatever, and you can manipulate it any way to make yourself see what you want it to see.
Sure.
Sure,
but the divination of the nothing allows us to hear things within ourselves that seem odd or don't fit, and I think that is, in a sense, a reading of the self. But I agree with... Go ahead.
We would do better if you just go by your instincts. If something doesn't seem right, stick with what you know. Just if you're looking at something and boy, that don't look right. Well, there's a reason it don't look right. You don't need a card to tell you it don't look right.
Mhm. Well, I have attending demons, and I go to them because they can. One of them has that ability. 4 has that ability to read in that sense, or to read me. And there is one individual that I will occasionally ask their thoughts on something that feels obscure to me. But I think that because of my total immersion in that sense, I rely on my attending demons. So, the question is, who do each of us go to? Morgan, can you read yourself?
Not to the extent that I would feel comfortable with making definitive decisions for everything on. As I said when we had our caller, if you are in tune with the energy that's proper for you and you are in tune with what is right for your life, you're going to know when something is off. But once you know when something is off, that's when it pays, I think, to have an objective person look at it, someone that you can trust to not BS you. Because here's the thing. Energy, you're looking at it through your own eyes, and there's often a big picture, things that you can't see. So sometimes I will talk to my dead, and they often give me great insights. And I have wonderful readings from the dead, but there are some people that I will trust, some living people that I will trust to give me that objective information. In the end, I have to make the decisions myself. I'm willing to weigh the information, and it always helps to get that outside opinion because they may really see something that you don't see. But in the end, I think we all have to go with what feels right for us. It never hurts, though, to get that second opinion.
Right, sure. And those of us who do this as their life's work, I hate to say for a living, but those of us who do this as their life's work, we're so deeply immersed in it, in a state of full immersion, that it is sometimes hard to say, I don't know that about myself at the moment. I don't know what's the best choice. When it came to getting, when I first saw the picture of Donatello, someone you both know intimately, I had this intense desire to bring her into my life in this moment. And I spoke to For, and I said, well, what do you think? And he said to me, your house or the bucket. That's what he said. And, I have an obsession with the breed, so I look at these pictures all the time. I'm always looking at puppies. I'm always looking at all this stuff. So it was not unusual for me to be on a site looking at dogs in this way. It wasn't that was a particularly special moment. But she just jumped out very much in the way that he did 3.5 years ago, the boy. And I said, I need a little bit of an assistance on this. I need to know if this is one of those moments where this is another dog that I'm, sort of flirtatious with about or not. And his word to me was, your house or the bucket. That's what he said. That was the actual language that he used. I'm grateful to have a attending demon with this kind of skill. But if not, there's one other person I would have gone to, who I check in with now and then regarding a decision. Because I want to know what the pure energy is. I want to know what the pure answer is, not what my intention or my desire is that's sitting around it. So a lot of people spend their day reading themselves, throwing cards and saying, oh, this is the morning card. I've met a lot of clients who have the morning card. They get up and the first thing they do is throw a tarot card or this kind of thing and say, oh, well, this is what my day is going to be like. It's all based on this, 7 of whatever. 7 of coins, whatever it is, and I'm stuck with that now. So do you sometimes get clients who have had what I refer to as reading burnout, too many readings from other people?
Well, yeah, but a lot of times it's going back to what we were discussing earlier. People have had 10 readings in the past month, and they never get the answer they want. I always find it so sad, though, when I get someone I understand when they've gone to 1 or even 2 people, and they aren't comfortable with the people and aren't necessarily comfortable with the information or the way it's being portrayed. But when people tell me they're always going to a reading or they're always looking at tarot cards, I find that so horribly sad. I just can't imagine living my life in a way where I have to seek some external guidance for whatever I'm going to do, cast the lots, throw some signs and omens, and live my life confined, because this is it's the beginning of superstition. It's really at the core of many superstitions, and it's exactly the same thing that they do in organized religion. They just do it different ways. They say, well, here's all the rules you have to follow, and then these other ways, the rule changes every day depending on what cards you draw or depending on what your telephone psychic has told you before they charged you $495 that you won't find out about until the phone bill comes at the end of the month. About this telephone psychic and about this, psychic on every corner, what I call roadside psychic. I like when clients know who I am, because when they know who I am, they know I've spent years and years, decades doing this, and they know that that's been my work, and that's how I've run my life, and that this work is taken front and center above any other possible work that I could do. And I think that it is important to have some kind of resume. I don't necessarily mean a resume like published books and all that. I mean a resume that says that you have spent a certain amount of your life in this work, that this has been your focus. I like when people know that this is all that I do. I like when people know that I've got over a dozen books published and that this is my work. I like when people know that they've listened to the radio show and they're checking in on that level and they know all about me. I want that. I want to be looked at in that way and have someone come to me because they want someone who's the real deal. But there are
the phone psychics, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that there's damage, extraordinary damage done through those situations.
Well, of course, because they're out to tell you what you want to hear, or just get a response for you. Mostly, they're out to keep you on the line as long as possible, so they can get as much money from you. I went and I'm trying to remember what it was. I was looking up. Some friends and I had a disagreement about the interpretation of a dream. So, I don't really do dream interpretation itself, but I was positive I knew what the symbolism was, and I went back to double check it on one of these dream websites. And in the corner of the dream website, there's a live psychic. He's sitting there on Skype. He's looking into the camera, and apparently he's there just ready to talk to you. And I just. The problem is when people put their lives into the hands of someone like that who has no interest in integrity and has no interest in bettering anybody, including themselves. They're just out for the fast buck. That's where all the damage comes. It's just you might just as well go and hand it to some shady guy in the back alley. You're more likely, if you hand your life into that person's hands, to get out at least somewhat intact. But with some of these psychics, there's no telling what they'll do, because they're going to tell you things that prey on your fears.
I want to say that when you go to, and I want to say this to listeners in archive, when you go to someone for a reading, you should know something about them. And what you should know about them is how many years they've been doing this, how much of a part of their life this is, what they feel has been their reason for doing this. You have the right to ask these questions. The information that they tell you is going to be so valuable because, like I said at the very beginning of this show, you cannot unring the bell. If you hear from a person who you trust for some reason, even if you trust them for that hour or that half hour, even if you trust them because you live in the interaction experience where I paid you, so you must be telling me the truth, and they say things to you that would make you think about your wellness or unwellness, make you think about the position that your partner has taken in your life or your work, make you think about your own ideas, your path. You can't unring this bell. You can't unring the bell, and I'll say it over and over again. So when you put your life in somebody's hands this way, because it is that. It is that. When we talk to people and we tell them important things about their life moving forward, then we are in the responsibility of holding the integrity and the truth of those things. So if you're going to somebody who's just got to read 10 people that day to pay for their table, or they have to make sure that they, have a list of returning clients, then there's a problem here. You wouldn't go to a psychiatrist, as you had said earlier, Morgan. You wouldn't go to a surgeon. You wouldn't go to a dentist with a drill in his hand because he started working on it. He read a book last week, and here he is with his tools. You have a right to know that the person that is about to tell you important things about your life has got a history of success in this work. I think that's vital. And I encourage people, in the same way I encourage practitioners to not get in a situation where their clients are in control of them, by which I mean clients that want to come once a week and all this kind of thing, and they just want to chat with you. Be careful of what the relationship is. I tell clients, people who are potential clients of mine and of other people, the same thing. Make sure that you know something about the history of that reader. And I'm not even saying that this has to be somebody who's made a living at this. It just has to be somebody who's made it part of their life, someone who's been doing it a long time, someone who can explain to you how they came to be sitting in the reader chair. I think it's important, and I think you have a right to ask that. Gentlemen, you have thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I definitely think you've got to ask questions. You got to talk to people. You just can't walk in there and trust somebody. I mean, would you walk into a doctor if
No.
a doctor told you something? Just like if I tell you something like, hey, you're sick, you've got problems. Don't take my damn word for it. Go check it out.
Right.
I'm not a surgeon. I'm just telling you what I see. Just because I see it doesn't necessarily mean it's something that's really life-threatening. I'm seeing an illness. It's not telling me exactly what illnesses it is. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. but, go find out why, what you've got to do. Because I'm not going to tell you what the treatment is because I don't know.
Right. You tell them the part you do know. Sometimes you look at someone and you see a break in their wellness. And I've said that to people. I'll say, I see something going on in this area. I don't have an X-ray machine in the back room, so go find out. But I see that there's something going on. And it is our job to tell them what we know. And that's it. And not to lay upon that some thought about diagnosis. I sometimes, and I'm sure you've had this experience, Chris, where you can see that someone's spouse is not being, let's just say,
I see a lot of people that are off balance.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll say to someone,
you should have been at the table for Thanksgiving.
Wow, that was recent. Sometimes I'll say to someone, I feel like there's some questionable integrity at home. And it's up to them to go figure out what that is. And they'll say, who is she? And give me her phone number. And that's not what I'm here to do. So we give them the pieces that we have, and we point them in the direction on occasion to go find the rest. Morgan, do you have anything to add? Because I'm going to start to wrap this up tonight.
No, I think this is probably a good place to end. We've covered almost everything. The only thing I would say is to everybody who's out there is make sure that, as we have just been talking about, that you know who you're going to with this. Right. And hey, you're listening to this show, so you know that there are some people out there who really know what they're doing. So don't be put off by how difficult it may be. If this information is really important to you, then make sure that you do your own homework, because you're trusting someone with something that is so important as a part of your life. You don't want to hand it over to just anyone. Don't ever hand control of your life over to just anyone. Keep it in your own hands. And then when the time is right and you get the guidance you need, you'll know exactly whether the person is spot on or whether they're just bullshitting you.
That's right. You should never, when you go to a reading, you should never have to try and fit those pieces in. You look at them and they say they don't make sense, and you try and fit them in. That should not be what happens. The information should feel like it fits. And even if it's uncomfortable, it should still feel like it's something that can belong to you. Morgan, you want to talk about how to find you?
Yes, you can find me at morganstknight@hotmail.com. You can also contact me on the website for my book. It's, talesofmedea.com. And if you need any of our web addresses, they are actually at the top of this episode page in the description of the episode. We have email links for all of us, as well as to our website, where you can find out more about our work and more about some of the things we do outside, including a list of all of the Sorceress's incredibly wonderful and insightful books.
I think you have one out there yourself. That's pretty great. Read Morgan's book. Everyone should read Morgan's book. I don't know how more clear I can put it than that. It is a powerful treatment of materials that you may or may not have heard about in mythology and in other areas in your life, but it is a powerful treatment of those individuals. I don't know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It needs to be read. And Morgan, thank you for producing this show. You're doing an amazing job. Chris, how do we find you? I mean, I know how to find you. How do other people find you?
It's on helsrogue at gmail.com. That's HELS. And also on my webpage, helsrogue on Facebook. And also on the Dark Matters website, where the rest of us are too.
Yeah, we have a really nice website which Morgan has developed, which gives you a header about each of us and talks about the work that we do and helps you find us and all of that. I'm the Sorceress Cagliastro. You throw that in Google, you'll not even want to read everything that's available. Lots and lots of pages. My books are on Amazon, and I'm very involved in teaching the work. Although people said to me, "Why do you want to teach the work?" And I say what I say. I will say now what I say all the time to my students. The more I teach it, it doesn't take anything away from me. I don't get worse at it if I teach it to you. So my website, aside from all the other ways to reach me, joined with the individuals with them on the air with at the radio show, my own website is cagliastro.com, and on there you can find ways to get involved with learning the materials. I now have 2 sections of classes, the core classes on Wednesday night, ongoing, with a wonderful group of students and professionals in this work. And in January, there will be a beginner class, and that's on the website. Also, it's 12 students only. I think there are 7 spots left, and that will start the first week of January. All that information is on the site. The best way to reach me is either through the site or through my Gmail, which I keep as simple as possible, sorceresscagliastro@gmail.com. And I get a lot of emails and do my best to answer them. And check out the books if you want them. They're on Amazon, and the rest is the rest. I feel very honored, joyful, and grateful to be able to do this work with my life, to talk about demons and to talk about the disincarnate, and to be on the air with great people like Chris and Morgan and Victor. And if divination is what you want, consider one of the 3 of us. Whatever sort of strikes you, go with your instinct. And if you're listening to this live, or if you're listening to it in archive, we appreciate the time that you've spent to spend part of your evening with us tonight. And we are here to talk about the work and make the work accessible. I'm the Sorceress Cagliastro, blood sorceress, necromancer in the hands of 9. And I am grateful to have been here, and I say now, good night. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, Sorceress.
Good night, Sorceress.
Good night.